Have you seen John Krasinski's YouTube program called Some Good News? Well, I think we all need some good news about now. And today we have some for you. Going to school every day with a learning or attention challenge is stressful. Meeting your own expectations as a parent or a teacher in this pandemic with distance learning is stressful. But today, our guests, Rick and Doris Bowman, have some practical strategies for you that will help you relax and know that you're doing the right thing, and that will ultimately help your kids become less stressed and more prepared for adulthood. This is LD Expert Live. Welcome to LD Expert Live, your place for answers and solutions for learning differences, dyslexia, and attention challenges. I'm your host, Jill Stowell, founder of Stowell Learning Centers and author of At Wit's End, A Parent's Guide to Ending the Struggle, Tears, and Turmoil of Learning Disabilities. This book will help you understand your smart but struggling student better and show you why these challenges don't have to be a permanent condition. To get a free copy, go to parentsatwitsend.com. Hey, we have a great show for you today. We're going to be taking a really concrete look at the way stress is affecting our struggling learners and the challenges that we're all experiencing right now. We're going to look at some practical tools based in neuroscience for helping yourself and your child. Our guests today are all about bringing hope into very challenging emotions and situations. So welcome to all our subscribers and guests who are joining us live. I encourage you to please share this with other parents and teachers you know. Let's say hello to Maddie, our moderator for today. Hey, Maddie.
Hi, and hello to everyone watching. Thanks for tuning in. We have a few people checking in to say hi already. Hi, Mona from Futures. Thanks for watching. And we have Karen checking in. Hi, Karen. Thank you so much. Definitely feel free to say hello. Let us know where you're checking in from. We love seeing all of your comments and questions. And if you're watching on the replay, definitely be aware that we do have a Facebook support group called Mom Squad. If you have a question that you're not able to get answered, that's a great place to connect with other parents and us as well. So I'm excited for today's topic. Rick and Doris have so much amazing information in store, and I'll be checking in a bit.
Perfect. Thanks, Maddie. If you're just joining us, this is LD Expert Live. I'm your host, Jill Stowell. Our guests today are Rick and Doris Bowman. I'm delighted to have Rick and Doris back with us today. They are wonderful trainers and have been very busy, in fact, training school districts as they head back to school, as well as mental health agencies around the country. Rick has a master's degree in clinical psychology and Doris has a master's in special education. Both have spent more than 20 years in education with a focus on serving children and teens who struggle with learning and behavior, emotional and mental health challenges. Welcome back, Rick and Doris.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jill.
Great
to see you.
It is so great to have you. You have so much fabulous information. Last time you were on, I was so inspired. I had my directors all attend a training with you the next week, and they loved it. So thank you for the work that you're doing.
Absolutely. That's great to hear.
When parents see the cover of my book, they invariably say, that's my child. That's what's happening at our house every day. If you have a child or a teen with learning or attention challenges, I know you've experienced the heartache of their struggles, their low self-esteem, your worries about their future. You know, your struggling student also feels a high degree of stress. In fact, they most likely experience toxic stress as a result of trying to navigate their challenges every day at school. Rick and Doris, can you talk to us about what toxic stress is, and in particular, what it looks like for students with learning challenges?
Absolutely. So we're going to look at a slide here for a minute. That's from a book called Nowhere to Hide. And basically what you can see here is that toxic stress can be a daily experience for students with ADHD and learning disabilities, as you said, Jill. And the thing is that students with learning disabilities or ADHD, when they are confronted with stress repeatedly in situations when they can't meet the expectations of their teachers, that we know that in reality or in their perception, they feel like these expectations are too difficult, then they exhibit behavior that is associated with a toxic stress response, which is activation of those areas of the brain that are involved in fight, flight, and freeze. So we know that the stress response system is overactivated anytime we have repeated experiences where we can't meet the expectation of our teachers. And we know also that we also experience this sense of loss of control too, whenever we have toxic stress. A third thing that I would like to say is that there's a lot of physiology that's involved in this. We have over 1,400 biochemical reactions when we have a stress response. That's right, 1,400 biochemical reactions in the brain and the body. And of course, we typically just talk about cortisol and adrenaline, and they are very important, but there's much, much more going on. And so there's in a toxic stress situation, the body is simply just in survival, and all of this chemistry goes into the body and increases the feelings of stress. And stress is a state of unease, but stress also results in anxiety, frustration, angry responses, and many, many more things as well. So I'm going to let Doris take over from here and talk about.
Well, we just wanted to share some examples because it might seem really simplistic, but when you think about a child that's going through their day and they experience a situation after situation after situation where they can't meet the expectations, they might be humiliated, their lower skills than their peers might be exposed. That just feels like a constant threat to them. And so if you think about not only being asked to read aloud to class, but read aloud in class, but imagine even as peers are being asked to read aloud in class and they're anticipating that I might be next, right? Given instruction, I might be given instructions that I don't understand. And then people are going to see that I don't understand. Asked to work in small groups where other kids will really see their learning disability. Or maybe if they're dealing with ADHD, like just knowing that the expectation is going to be that I sit still at my seat and I know I can't do that. Or if I'm doing that, I can't learn because when I'm not moving, I can't learn, I can't focus. And so they just experience this from the start to the end of the day. And our own daughter, as we shared on the last time we were with you, had really significant learning disabilities, like could not read at all at the end of third grade. And her experience of school, even if she talks about it now, she can become very emotional because she remembers that feeling of like panic and fear and threat to the point that I would get calls from the school saying like, you know, she has this terrible stomach ache. She wants to come home. And really it was all that toxic chemistry going on in her body and there's her constant sense of fear. So Rick can share a little bit about what that physiology is like.
You know, when you think about 1,400 chemical reactions, you realize that when kids say they have a stomach ache or they have a headache or they don't feel good, I mean, a lot of times your first response is to think, oh, they're just trying to get out of something.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, that really shows us that, yeah, they probably really do have, you know, some kind of physiological reaction and it makes them not feel good.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and so the physiology that is created in creating all of these stress hormones, neurotransmitters, other chemicals into the body and the brain makes it feel as if there is a bear running at them. And they can actually feel that way, as well as the fact that the bear is actually chasing them all day. So this particular slide that we're looking at here is a slide about fear conditioning. And this is where the body can learn to perceive an otherwise mundane stimulus as threatening. So let me just go through this real quick. So you see up in the right-hand corner where this person had been maybe even years ago bitten by a small animal. And now when they see a small animal, they activate the stress response to where it feels like they're going to be attacked by a large, vicious animal. And so this is the way the brain works. This is our survival part of our brain. And what happened in this particular instance is that this individual, just seeing the dog, just being, having a perception of a situation, like seeing a small dog, is now associated in the brain with having been bitten by a dog, can now create a fear response. And so, for example, how would this work with kids in a classroom? Like Doris said, a child that may have had a very poor experience reading in front of the class, or maybe, for example, just being online is very stressful. And now what the brain does is that it patterns that response with just being online. Is now a stressor, a huge stressor for the child, and the child can feel like they're being chased by a bear. And so that's basically what happens in these types of situations.
So let's talk about that added layer of distance learning that our kids and parents and teachers are dealing with now. For many students, with or without learning challenges, this adds an extra layer of fearfulness. Can you talk to us about why some kids may feel unsafe online?
Absolutely. You would think that being on the other side of a screen and not being in the classroom and, a lot of those feelings of threat might not be so present. But for many students, just their perception of how others are perceiving them can create a lot of sense of unsafety. So they may look at themselves in the screen and think, oh my gosh, I look so ugly, or I'm afraid that other kids are looking at me and thinking I look ugly. Maybe parents have to head off to work early and there's no one there to do their hair or, help them be sure that they're cleaned up. And then also just the idea that this is allowing other peers to see into my home. They can see what my home looks like. They can maybe see my family members. What if my mom walks through behind where I'm learning, or my dad walks through, or a sibling says or does something inappropriate? Like, there are a lot of variables and a vulnerability to the fact that other people can now see into my home. And even if it's a wonderful, stable home, like, their fear of how peers might perceive that or their teacher might perceive it can really be creating a sense of fear. So it's really important to, I'm going to let Rick talk about just, how do we get at what some of these fears are for kids so that we can help them, because we can't just make assumptions that they're resistant to learning or they're just avoiding the learning or avoiding the, the distance situation. We want to really look at it with them.
And what Doris is kind of talking about here is a sensitized stress response, where what happens is, if you've been through a lot of fearful, stressful situations and you have a lot of stressors in your life, then even very small stressors can cause what we would call a sensitized response, meaning that small stressors can create a stress response that's as large as a big stressor could cause. And so the child then is really going through this stress throughout the entire day. And, it would be like having your toaster, having your fire alarm over and above your toaster. And whenever you you plugged it in, put some toast in, and you made some toast, your brain would be telling you there's a fire when simply all you were doing was making toast. So these kids then, we need to provide opportunities for them to let them know that what may be stressful for them in ways that are non-threatening. In other words, we have to talk to them in a way that's very regulating, talk to them in a way that's very neutral, where we don't really necessarily talk about any challenging behavior. We have to be very empathetic. We're never blaming or shaming or creating a sense that there's something wrong with you. And one of the ways that we like to do this, an example might be something like this. So I asked my student or my child, so it seems like something about being online seems hard for you right now. Can you help me understand? Is there some way that I can help you right now? And so as you notice, as I'm talking in this very relational way with the child, that what I'm really doing is something that we call dosing. I'm dosing them with moderate, predictable, controlled, relational doses of stress. So what we know, which is fascinating, is that it takes stress to change the stress response. But it's this moderate, predictable, controlled doses of stress that help repattern the stress response in our kids. And we can simply do it by the way that we approach them, by the way that we talk to them in this particular manner. Hey, help me understand. I know there must be a good reason why you're having difficulty with being online right now. I just want to know why. I just want to understand so that I can help you. And notice again, what we're doing is we're regulating that stress response system, which is really the brainstem and the limbic system, so that now we can get to those areas of the cortex where learning, problem solving, frustration tolerance occurs. And so this dosing then is very, very important to repatterning our nervous system and causing less of a sense of threat for the child.
And just, that whole recognition that, if my child is avoiding being on the screen, it probably isn't because they're lazy or they're unmotivated or, they just don't want to do it. They're being defiant. There's something under that. And so just recognizing, oh, wow, there are a lot of things that could be, causing my child to feel this way that I wasn't even aware of. And so, taking a neutral time to investigate that, it's going to be really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
what about for parents and teachers? I mean, distance learning also puts them in a more vulnerable position.
Absolutely. I think that the adults right now are really facing a lot more vulnerability in terms of their own fears of failure, right? So it's the same for all of us adults. There are loads of new expectations, things that maybe we feel like we aren't very good at, right? We haven't done virtual teaching before. We haven't had to school our child at home, supporting them virtually learning from a teacher over a device. I think that both the teachers and the parents are experiencing fears of worrying that kids won't be engaged, worrying that they won't make progress, and even being stressed about looking foolish to the other adults, right? So the teacher may be a little stressed about, like, am I going to look ridiculous to the parent? Or the parent might feel like, gosh, am I going to look like I really measured up? I saw a great post on social media the other day that was like, remember, your child's learning area does not need to be Pinterest or Instagram worthy, right? So there's this sense of pressure that, and I saw another post in a special education teacher group I'm part of where the teacher talked about, like, I cried at the end of my school day today. I cried on the way home. I cried when I got home. And the stress of this is just overwhelming. So I think that, for adults, for us to recognize that as much as the kids are experiencing stressors, we are as well, and to be gracious to ourselves in all these new expectations.
Parents and teachers really do want to help their kids. And I said we were going to talk about some good news. So here's the good news. When you help you help your kids too. And Rick and Doris have some thoughts about that for us, about how you as parents and teachers can help yourselves take care of yourselves.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the first step, honestly, is to just recognize that I am in a new role, and it comes with new fears and new pressures, and that our stress response system is being taxed in new ways. And so this puts a lot of us into survival mode a lot of the time. And so when that happens, we respond in the same ways under stress that often the kids do. We become more rigid, more black and white thinking. We're less flexible. Sometimes we can be more reactive, right? And we'll be talking more today about how predictability and patterns can really help to lower our stress level for adults and kids, and how we can take advantage of that by using routines and rituals to help us all feel calmer and safer. So I'm going to let Rick share a little more about that.
Yeah, a couple other things that we can really do to change the stress response, not only in our children, but in us, and in that way help our kids, is to acknowledge it, acknowledge that we are experiencing this stress, and help our kids acknowledge us as well, and better recognize what is happening to us and why it is happening to us. One of the things that's very interesting that I wanted to bring up is that there's always been this thought over the ages that thoughts are faster than emotions, and therefore always cause emotions. And what we know is that emotions are actually faster than thoughts. We know that because of the way that the brain is wired, that our emotional responses really are running a lot of what we do and what we say. We think we're managing our emotions, but most of the time our emotions are managing us. And so what happens then is we typically will have a stressful emotion, and then we will have a corresponding thought that goes with that emotion, a negative thought, of course. And so if we have a depleting emotion, we'll have a depleting thought, and then we'll have another depleting emotion, another depleting thought. You get the idea here. It becomes a looping sort of pattern. And then what basically happens then is that the brain becomes used to that loop, and it becomes very familiar with that loop, and it repeats the loop automatically over and over and over again. So we then have to really become aware of what emotions that we are experiencing. We have become aware of the depleting emotions that we frequently feel, those stressful emotions. We have to really think about what are those things in our life, situations, maybe people, that are activating these or triggering these depleting emotions. And when we are able to become aware of these things, then we have a better ability to shift to what we would call renewing emotions. And renewing emotions are those emotions that we all want to feel, the emotions of gratitude, compassion, care, kindness, appreciation, those type of emotions. And so we can learn to generate feedback loops to change our emotions and to change the way that we're thinking. Remember, if we change our emotions, we change the way we're thinking. So we have positive emotions, renewing emotions. We're going to think in a more positive way. Remember, we're now not feeling these stressful emotions and all of the chemical things that are going on in our body. And what's awesome about this as well is that these renewing emotions are contagious. And so when we actually experiencing more renewing emotions as adults, whether we're teachers or the parents, what we do then is we transmit these emotions to the kids. They can actually feel our emotion. So when we can feel care and compassion toward them, they're going to feel the care and compassion that we have. And guess what's going to happen? That's going to help them become more able to learn the techniques and tools to be able to generate more emotion, more renewing emotions for themselves.
Wow. There was a lot in there. You know, that idea of awareness, when we at the Learning Center, when we work with students in attention training, well, the very first step is awareness, because awareness is the beginning of change. And so just starting to become aware, to consciously become aware of the emotions and, you know, what are things are triggering that, and then acknowledge them, we can begin to change them. Mm-hmm. So I hear that you have a list of questions in your shower to help you kind of do this. So I want to hear about that.
We do.
I can. You want me to start for a minute? We have in our shower. So when we get in the shower every day, we have a list of things that are posted on the wall of the shower there, and they're things like this: what kind of person do you want to be today? What kind of thoughts do you want to have? What kind of feelings do you want to experience? What kind of feelings do you want to avoid? What kind of person do you want to be for others? Mm-hmm. And so on.
And then what would that look like? How would you walk that out? What would it sound like? What would you be saying? And making each of those areas, the thinking and the feeling areas, concrete. And it all kind of amounts to, who do you want to show up as for yourself, for your kids, for your spouse or partner? Like, you know, who is it that you're going to walk into your day? And just being really purposeful about that, I think, helps us walk into the day with some of that awareness.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a really great way to start the day. Rick and Doris have some very practical strategies for parents and teachers, and we're going to talk about those right after we check in with Maddie and our viewers.
Hello. I just want to say how much I love your concept of, depleting and restoring emotions. Our director, Chantel, when she got back from your training, she kind of had like a whole presentation for our staff on it, and it was very helpful. So thank you for that. And I'm not alone in the gratitude. We have some people checking in to say hello and thanking you. Holly saying good morning. Hi, Holly. Sylvia also saying good morning. Thanks for joining us. We have Deborah Ann. She says, good morning from helping the behaviorally challenging child. She's a big fan of you guys, and just says thank you for coming on again. She's excited to see what you have to say.
Well, we're a fan of hers as well, and you all have her in Orange County, I'll tell you, for parent support.
Yes, definitely. Karen just saying how on point the content was, so thank you for that. And then we have Joe wondering, can we have a list of the questions you keep in the shower? Maybe we can post those in the notes later.
Absolutely.
And then Deborah Ann says, helping parents and children become aware without shame or blame is key to being able to then learn the skills. So true. Thanks for taking us this effectively. I love that. And then we do have a question from a parent. My son has ADHD and is on edge all the time. He flies off the handle no matter what I say. Is there anything I can do to change this, or is it just a normal part of being a teenager?
I haven't had a couple
of
thoughts.
I do too. Go ahead.
Okay, I figured we both did. That sounds like a pattern that's developed over time. And, we have 3 kids, and one of whom had really significant ADD. And of course, like I shared, one with learning disability, and, there are certain patterns that you get into. And I think the best way to approach that really is working to shift that pattern. And even though you might not get the response that you are looking for immediately, but shifting to a pattern, I would say the most important thing that I would try to do, if I'm thinking about it through the eyes of a parent, is even approaching them and saying, hey, it seems like when I try to talk to you about a certain topic, something about that seems kind of hard. Like it seems really frustrating and real stressful for you when we try to talk about that. Can you help me understand like what's making that hard? Or is there something about that that makes you feel, and really like just exploring kind of having this empathetic conversation about why it's hard to talk, right? And starting there. And, are you and if he says, oh, I don't know, it's just dumb, I don't want to talk to you, then I would explore and say, well, could I take a couple guesses? Like, I'm wondering if maybe you're like anticipating that you're in trouble, or maybe you're feeling like embarrassed or ashamed that you did something that, now we're going to talk about it and it feels frustrating to talk about that. And just use some guessing to kind of get at that, because, teenagers especially, but kids in general, like a lot of times if they're either they can get really stuck and not really be able to help us even know what's hard. So sometimes we have to get into the guessing.
Yeah, going along with what Doris said, I think one of the things to do is really think about, so what expectations are that, I'm asking you as your mom that you're having difficulty with. So, I mean, what Doris was kind of describing there is that instead of talking about the behavior, saying, help me understand. It seems like whenever I ask you to do such and such, that's really hard for you. Help me understand. I know you must have a good reason for why you are not being able to tell me. And the behavior is just what we call the smoke. It's just the byproduct of the child not having the skills to be able to tell his mother what is really bothering him or why he can't meet certain expectations. And we also know that when a child is under a lot of stress or toxic stress, or any of us are, then remember, we're in that part of our brain that is in fight, flight, or freeze. And so we lose access to our cortex. So if you ask me, so in this case, let's just stay with him. If you ask him a question and he's upset, then it's going to be really difficult for him to access the cortex. And maybe he doesn't, maybe he lacks some skills to be able to tell you what he's really experiencing. And so what we can do is we can build those skills through these conversations that Doris was describing. And but the first thing that we have to do is regulate that stress response system. We have to regulate that part of the brain that's involved in the stress response system. And that's simply by these questions that are very neutral. They're very compassionate, kind, caring, empathetic, to really help lower that stress response so we really can hear what he has to say.
And, another key that I just thought of too that might be really helpful is just think about the timing of when you're trying to have the conversations. If the timing is at the time when things are stressful, or at the time when he hasn't met the expectation or whatever, then it's going to be a lot less likely, again, that he's not in his cortex, that he's really like in the defensive mode. And so if you can pick a different time of the day and then choose to be doing something, you're walking the dog side by side down the road, or you're riding in the car together. So there's not that like face-to-face, eye-to-eye contact that can feel real vulnerable. And just sometimes it takes a little experimenting, but most of the time as a parent, you can figure out, it might be chopping vegetables for dinner, right? But you're side by side doing something, some project, or shoveling whatever bark out in the yard, and doing it at those type of times when it's not the moment that the hard thing is happening.
That makes so much sense. I was actually, when you said not being like face-to-face, being more side by side, I was just like thinking about experiences that like me as a teenager. And that's so true. It's like being like that face-to-face, there is something so much more vulnerable about it. It's a lot easier to talk when you're not having to look at someone.
Yeah. I mean, for some kids, it's even by text. Like, hey, we talk about this. Could we text about it? And just giving them that option to start out with texting, and then maybe you can move to conversation at some point.
We have a grown son right now who's, I think he's about 34, and Doris will text back, and they text back and forth with each other, and it's a lot less threatening for him. He would prefer to communicate in that way. So when we communicate in the way the child prefers, we're giving them this sense of control too, right? We're giving some control over to them, and they experience that. And remember, as we talk about the stress response and stress has a lot to do. It always has something to do with some feeling or of sense of loss of control.
Yeah, that's such great perspective. Thank you so much. And for our audience, definitely keep posting your questions. I'll be checking back in to answer the rest of them in a little bit.
All right. Well, thank you, Maddie. This is LD Expert Live. I'm your host, Jill Stowell, founder of Stowell Learning Centers. And my guests today are Rick and Doris Bowman. They are certified trauma specialists and trainers for school districts and mental health professionals. They have such a wealth of practical strategies for living healthier, less stressful lives. And the strategies work because they're based in neuroscience and how human beings really operate. So let's dive into that a little bit and talk about the 6 R's for repatterning toxic stress.
Well, these are Bruce Perry's 6 R's, and they're for self-regulation, toxic stress. And here is a list of them on your screen. So you're seeing that one is relational, and I'm going to talk about that one in a little more depth here in a minute. You want material to be relevant, in other words, developmentally matched. You have to be aware of the developmental levels of your students as a teacher so that you can provide them the appropriate content that they need. We're going to talk about repetitive patterned responses here in a minute. And we're talking about any activities that you have with them. Anything that you're doing in class needs to be rewarding. In other words, something that they enjoy doing. And then this issue of rhythmic, and we're going to talk about that here in a minute as well, that we know that rhythm always regulates the brain. And then finally, the 6th R is respectful of the child's culture, their family, their background, and to really kind of use all of that as sort of a springboard for the learning, for the teaching that you're doing. So what I want to do is just kind of touch on these 3 of these areas, 3 of these 6 R's, and one is the relational. If the relational piece is so important, as we all know, whether you're a teacher or a parent, it's the quality of the relationship that's going to make a difference as to whether no matter what we do is going to work. So if we are using very neutral, calming, regulating statements to the child, of course, they can also, as we said earlier, they can feel whether our emotions are renewing or they're depleting, and that plays a big role. They can also tell whether we really genuinely care about them. They can tell whether we really have a lot of empathy toward their circumstances and their situations. So the quality of the relationship is always the most important piece. It's the biggest one of the 6 R's because relationship, the quality of the relationship between the helper and the helpee is always the biggest factor in any type of relationship. And the main thing about creating a relationship too, with whether you're a teacher or we can always improve as a parent as well, is we create this sense of safety. And safety calms that central nervous system. It calms that stress response. And so we must always have relationship, regardless of which of the 6 R's that we are using. The other thing that I want to just talk about for a couple of more minutes is repetitive or patterned. And anything that is done in a repetitive, patterned way is regulating. And we know that the brain changes through these repetitive, patterned doses of relational stress. And so anything that we can do over and over again that is repetitive and patterned and relational is what that's going to do is, again, calm the nervous system. But not only that, it's going to work in the brain to basically repattern the stress response. This is the type of stress that the child needs. And then finally, rhythmic. So anything that's rhythmic is highly regulating to the lower parts of the brainstem and the limbic system. And when we do, let's say, teach in a rhythmic fashion, that's helpful. When we use activities that involve rhythmic components to them, such as, let's say, we use music in the classroom, we use movement in the classroom, but we can do this at home as well. As we talked about earlier, you can take a walk with the child. That's rhythmic. Anytime that we can move the body, we can access all of these or any of these somatosensory things. We are regulating the brain. And again, this is how we build neurocognitive skills. This is how we can address the stress response and repattern it.
So one of the ways that I think that we would really recommend right now during this time, and especially I believe that most, if not all, of the folks who would be on right now are maybe experiencing virtual learning, a great majority anyway, whether from home or as the teacher. But thinking about, for parents, like, you could have a certain song that your child likes that you play right before they get online. And this is kind of our groove, right? We eat breakfast, we put our song on while we brush our teeth or whatever, and then we get online. Having a special buddy or a character or a figure, some kind of sensory item, a fidget, etc., that's always right in that child's online learning space, and they look forward to it. So it's like, that's my thing that I get to connect with when I get on online learning. And then also having them have something to look forward to at the end of a successful day. So I know when my online learning is done, we do this thing together. And if you can, make this thing something relational. So not necessarily like, oh, now I get 30 minutes of computer time, but now we go take a walk around the block and we take the dog for a walk, and maybe we eat a snack while we walk, or whatever it is that the child really likes. For teachers, then, just think about this in terms of the other side of it is, like, when kids come on, I would absolutely have like a class theme song, right? I used to have a song I played when my students arrived in the morning, and one of my behavioral programs was called Good Morning Beautiful, right? And you know, they look forward to this. It's like, oh, this is how I kind of embrace my day, is through this song. I used a lot of rhythmic kind of Caribbean steel drum band kind of music because it's around that 60 to 80 beats per minute, which matches the heart rate, a typical heart rate in utero. And so that can be very regulating. And then have ways to help the kids connect to their teacher and to their peers. So what do we do? With little kids, you could do some kind of clapping game. You could do some kind of, let's get up and let's do these movements or these motions, right? And then again, have something fun at the end of the learning session to help them, you know, have something to look forward to and hang in there. It's like, okay, and at the end of the session, we play this game. We play on screen, whatever, tic-tac-toe, or we play on screen, you know, something fun that they like. And maybe that would rotate, that different kids get some choice in that. So they, again, choice and control. So the more you can bring them into figuring out what these things are, again, you go back to giving them some control, but also really creating these rituals and these routines. And so it starts to feel predictable and safe, and like, okay, I know that I can, you know, I can cope with this. I have a way of transitioning into starting my learning for the day. I have a way of transitioning out of it at the end of the day, and it can make things a lot less challenging. So, but at the same time, you know, I wouldn't expect necessarily that you're going to see like an overnight just transformation, right?
No, probably not. But I love what Doris said, because the more predictability that we can bring to a situation, such as rituals and routines, the more safety the child feels. The more they can predict how we're going to respond to them, the more safety and in control they feel. And that reduces the stress, and that can really reduce the stress response.
You know, parents and teachers, I'm sure, are feeling so overwhelmed. I have a friend who she's starting back to school today. She is an incredible teacher. And I don't think I've ever seen her so stressed about a school year. She's usually so excited to see her kids. And so, you know, I'm sure that many parents and teachers are thinking, oh my gosh, one more thing I have to think about. I got to have a morning song, and I got to have a way to get out of the day. I got to have these things. But really, I just, these are incredible ideas. And when we create that predictability for our kids, they do feel safer. And when they feel safer, they are calmer, and you have fewer behavior problems, and they're more engaged, and they learn better. And so the investment right now in creating a few of these things, you know, makes it actually makes it fun, and really sets all of you up for a better school year.
Yeah, I think it can just make everything easier. You know, you're setting the child up. You're thinking nervous system first, right? You're thinking like calm, safety, nervous system first. And if I've attended to that, all the other things that seem challenging throughout the day can gradually get a little easier. And so in the long run, we know that's the only way to tackle this. We know that without addressing the nervous system, we'll never see sustained behavioral change. Like science is showing us that. So yeah, it makes everything easier.
Well, we know the stress response system is not repatterned immediately, so it's going to take a little time. And we know that short and moderate doses of positive relational stress is going to help repattern that. We know that we can return that stress response back to baseline over a period of time. And what I would say to the teachers out there that are feeling a lot of stress is, as you do what we're encouraging you to do today, your stress response is going to also calm down. You're going to repattern your stress response, because what you're going to do is, as you said, you're going to see your children, you're going to see less challenging behavior. There's going to be more learning. And you're going to see that their regulation then is also going to be contagious to your regulation as well. So it's every time that you have a connection with your children, whether it's your students or adult or another adult, we do have this connection that's occurring between us. We are connected to each other in so many ways. And so we're just encouraging that if you use these type of things, that you definitely, when you're helping them build the skills for regulation, you're building the skills for regulation as well.
Absolutely. And your state will convey to them, right? I think of it as like, some people refer to it as priming, but some way that you get yourself ready to go on in the morning, right? And it might feel ridiculous at first, like brush your teeth, put the music on that you like, put that one song on and dance like what, and you feel ridiculous while you're, but your state is going to be affected by that, and it will help diffuse anxiety and bring this more positive state. And then you're bringing that to the kids. So can help you and really help them as well.
Wow. Great stuff. If you're just joining us, I'm Jill Stowell here on LD Expert Live with Rick and Doris Bowman, talking about how parents and teachers can help themselves and help their students handle stress. These are definitely suggestions that we can all put to use right now. Before we wrap up, let's see who's joined us in the chat.
Hello. I do have a quick comment on the idea of just like pumping up the music, doing whatever you have to do to get ready for the day. That reminds me, I have a friend who, she works at a bank, but she doesn't really love her job, but her like motto is like, I get ready for work every day like I'm going to a party. So she is like, she just like gets herself like in that state of mind, and yeah, it just like gets her ready for the day. So that's so true. Anyways, we have a question from the audience. My daughter always waits until the last minute to do her work. She gets very stressed about it, but says that she can't work unless she's under pressure. Is stress always a bad thing?
No,
stress is not a bad thing. Stress oftentimes motivates us to to be able to do better in whatever we're doing. We know that moderate levels of stress can create higher levels of performance. It's when we have this toxic stress, when we have this overwhelming sense that we can't meet other people's expectations, we don't have any control in our life, and it feels like the bear is coming after us all day long. Mm-hmm. That's when we lose access to our ability to really learn.
And I think also, I wish I had recognized this and known this when I was in college, because you were describing me. I can't tell you how many 25-page papers I wrote the night before it was due back in the day when we had everything paper, right? And I'd have 30 articles spread out all over the floor and be marking them. But if I'd been able to look at it, I think one of the things that I've really recognized lately, so there's some of that I think involves anxiety and being able to get off the starting block, right? And so it's task initiation. It isn't that she can't do the task, mm-hmm. but it's initiating the task. And so breaking down, what part of the task is it that's hard for her to either start or get past to get into doing the rest of the task? Because I bet it's not the whole thing that she's procrastinating. I bet there's part of it. Mm-hmm. It's either the starting it, the organizing it, the thinking, some part of it is a struggle more than the whole thing globally. And at least this is what we find a lot with kids and with teens. And so helping to look at that. And then again, picking a time when it's not homework time and saying, hey, so let's take this apart a little bit. Is there a certain part of doing your writing assignment that's hard for you? Is there let's think about the getting started part. Is it hard for you to think of ideas? Is it hard for you to organize the ideas? And helping to figure out what might be causing that resistance until, she reaches a certain pressure point where it's pushes her off the block, right? And so I think that's one possibility too, is just to pick a time when it's not that challenging time and see if they can take it apart a little bit.
Mm-hmm. That's such a good point. I wish I had someone when I was, like you said, in high school and college, someone to kind of help me work through that, because I was such a procrastinator. And it was funny because I had a student, he was a junior in high school, and I related to him so much because we both had this thing where it was almost we put it off because we put so much pressure on ourselves to perform.
Yeah, a lot of perfectionism sometimes.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then when you wait till the last minute, you almost let yourself off the hook because it's last minute, so it's obviously not going to be as good, so you don't have that same amount of pressure. I don't know if you've ever heard anyone else say that, but
oh yeah. And I definitely, perfectionism was a big part of my procrastination too.
And very quickly, one of the things we like to tell people, when kids or adults, when they're feeling this procrastination, they're feeling this sense of, I've got to do this perfect and that I keep putting it off, is to really work at taking the significance out of whatever that is, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Because what you've slipped over now is from I really care about doing well on this to I must do well on this. Mm-hmm. And when you are in that space, you're in a space of toxic stress.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Well, I really appreciate this content. We do have another question from one of our listeners, Joe. My teenager who went to private school from K through 7th grade, she started homeschooling in 8th and is still now in 12th grade. She still carries the esteem problems from school and anxiety. Any advice for him?
You want to go ahead?
Well, I think that, we've experienced this. We've experienced this with our daughter from the learning struggles that she went through. And I think that the biggest thing that I would focus on, honestly, are looking for those areas of competency and really building those areas of competency. So in the areas where you can find that she feels a sense of competence, whether it's academics or whether it's other things, right? Whether she's amazing at doing ceramics or at running track or whatever other things that she is really good at, to really emphasize those areas of competence, because what can help us move past, we all know that we're terrible at certain things, right? If you asked me to go run the mile right now, I'd run about, a quarter of a mile and collapse. But, it's picking. So we all know we have weaknesses, but it's our competencies that help us build up that sense of like, okay, I can take on life. I'm good at certain things. I can focus on those things. And so that would be my first thought, is really look for those competencies and then help her to see where she shines. And, and be like, yeah, sometimes we have to do the other stuff that we kind of stink at. And, at the same time, let's really focus on these areas. I don't know. Does that?
Yeah. And I think the only thing I would say too is to really, and we don't have time to talk about it here, but is to really we have techniques and we have tools that we could share that would help really work on associating renewing emotions with certain activities and things and
reducing that anxiety.
Yeah, reducing that anxiety. We can reduce anxiety. I mean, if you think about what we're talking about today, stress is sort of this thing that happens, but we experience a whole lot of different emotions because of the stress. So learning some new techniques and tools to be able to replace those stressful feelings of anxiety with some renewing feelings, because the brain is basically just running on automatic pilot at this point, and that's why she's experiencing that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that, and thank you to our audience for all of your comments and questions. We love connecting with you. And we do realize that a good majority of our viewers do watch on the replay. So again, we want to make sure you know about our Facebook group, Mom Squad. If there's a question you didn't get to answer or didn't get to ask, that group is available for you to connect with other parents and us as well. We answer questions there too.
Great. Thank you, Maddie. And we really do love hearing from our subscribers and viewers. So thank you, all of you, for joining us. This is LD Expert Live. I'm Jill Stowell with our guests, Rick and Doris Bowman. So I promised you that we would have some good news for you today. So let's review some of the hopeful things that we talked about today. First, you have permission to take care of yourself, because when you, parents and teachers, take care of yourself, you are also taking care of your kids. Second, creating predictable routines and rituals help kids stay engaged and feel secure. And then third, doing these predictable things every day, no matter how your child responds, will make a change over time and allow you to know that you're doing the right thing for your child's brain. Doris and Rick, what would you like to add to that as we wrap up today?
Well, we really want to encourage people. I think on the final slide, you're going to see our Transforming Trauma, Raising Resilience Connected Community. That is on Facebook. And we want to really encourage you to like and follow that page. And Rick is actually, some of these things he talked about that we didn't have time to touch on today, he's going to begin doing short, like 5-10 minute Facebook Lives on many of these topics. So 2 or 3 times a week, he'll be on doing Facebook Lives where you can ask questions, find out more about some of these techniques and things for resilience. And I think the thing we really want to emphasize here again is that when you become more aware, you can learn to make shifts, right? And so we have to have awareness first, then we can make the shifts. And then over time, we can create a new pattern that will become a default for our brain, the automatic pilot for our brain. So
yeah, I just want to say again, you are not your thoughts, okay? That's not who you are. You are not your worries, your fears, your stress, your anxiety. These are a result of familiar patterns that have been established over time through your physiology. So you can change these things. We want to offer you great hope that you can change them within yourself. You can change that, help your students do the same, and you as parents out there can change them within members of your family as well, as you work together to create more renewing emotions in your life, as well as some of the other things that we spoke about today.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Rick and Doris. It's really been great to have you with us today.
Thank you so
same here.
much.
We always
Yeah.
enjoy joining you and sharing what we can with the folks that you're serving.
Well, it's really, really good stuff.
Mhm.
So take a look at the Bowman's website for all their services, trainings, and events, and be sure and check out their new Connected Community Facebook page for educators, mental health professionals, and parents working with children with trauma. This is LD Expert Live, your place for answers and solutions for learning disabilities, dyslexia, and attention challenges. Next Tuesday, we'll be talking to Stacy Payne, licensed speech pathologist and ADHD specialist, about the relationship between early speech and language issues and learning challenges in school. Stacy is a lot of fun and has a wealth of information for you, so be sure to subscribe on YouTube and hit the bell to set a reminder. Stowell Learning Centers are open for remote sessions and screenings. We're also seeing students on site with all the COVID precautions. We work with children and adults wherever you are in the world, doing targeted brain training to improve thinking and learning. If you would like a free consultation for yourself or your child, give us a call or visit our website at stowellcenter.com. Stowell Learning Centers are a part of a network of centers around the country working to permanently change learning and attention challenges. If there is a network partner in your area, we will connect you. Thank you again, Rick and Doris, for being here. And I just want to say to people, we work with students with learning and attention challenges, and it is stressful for our kids and our families to deal with those challenges day after day. And Rick and Doris have given us some great tools for beginning to recognize and actually repattern those emotions. The other piece that I just have to say here is that we know that most learning and attention challenges are the result of weak underlying skills, underlying processing or learning skills. And when those skills are identified and developed, then the student is able to learn easily and more comfortably, as they should be able to. And once they're able to do that, that also is a huge boost in confidence and self-esteem, because the root of the struggles has now gone away. So if you would like to understand more about that, go to parents@witsend.com, get a copy of my book, or give us a call and talk to us about your child at stowellcenter.com. Now, our next few shows will be pre-recorded, but they are awesome. So be sure to turn on notifications in Facebook and set a reminder on YouTube so you don't miss them. Have a great week.